Isaiah 32 continues in verse 2, saying that our God is like the streams of water in a dry place. This refers to times when people are suffering. And one of the greatest ways to help them when people are suffering is to give them hope. Not a synthetic hope, but a real one. Jesus often encouraged his disciples when they were suffering by telling them there would come a time when those sufferings would end. He constantly pointed them to the rewards of being faithful in those times of difficulty, and it reminded them of his power to enable them to continue to be faithful. This is exactly what God is talking about here. When suffering or sacrifice has dragged on for a long period of time, or even when it's longer than we expected, we can become hopeless. Our faith begins to become dry and withered. Our joy becomes strained or even exhausted. It is truly possible for us to be in God's will, to be serving God, and yet to become dry as a desert, even as we are experiencing the person and power of Almighty God, even as we're in his will. The dry place here is the desert that characterized most of southern Israel. It is a place where water is rare, thirst is common, and where dying of thirst is a constant concern. God often calls his children to live and to serve in such places and to experience such times. These are places far from the refreshment of the great places like the Jordan River or Sea of Galilee. These are places where droughts often dry up trusted watering places, and one must live or die by faith. Some look at such places as places of suffering, but God here shows that these places are places instead of blessing. The difference is indeed one of perspective. When our eyes are on our circumstances and or our environment, we will become dry and defeated. When our eyes are on God, we will see that he is truly and practically the streams of water in a dry place. When we need the refreshment that only God can give, and he does, we begin to appreciate who and what he is, and to become refreshed in ways only he can provide. Our lives take on a true and clear supernatural character. One of the reasons God brings times such as these upon us is to teach us one of the most important lessons of life. And that's that he is the only well of spiritual water. The only well that always refreshes and never runs out. It is the only place we can look to where we will always find the need met. God is such a well that always refreshes. He never disappoints. So how do we enjoy this refreshment? Well, we must first stop seeking it from other resources that do and will run dry, and that often, even when we discover them, they don't satisfy, they don't meet the need. Then we must learn to trust him. We do this by learning of his promises, and then by trusting God to keep them. As we live and obey, or as the gospel song says, as we trust and obey, we learn that God is always like springs of water in a dry place. Wouldn't it be a tragedy to have such a source of refreshment and not come to it and not use it? The invitation is there. The issue is, will we come to Jesus?